Hey! Thank you all for being here. Hello and welcome to the Commonwealth Club. My name is DJ Patil. I'm a general partner at Great Point Ventures and a member of the Commonwealth Club Board of Governors. The club would like to thank the Bernard Osher Foundation for supporting tonight's Good Lit event. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest. Known as the creator of ImageNet, a catalyst for modern artificial intelligence, Dr. Fei-Fei Li has spent more than 2 decades at the forefront of the field. I really think of her as putting not just one cornerstone down of modern AI. She has put down multiple cornerstones of AI, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. She's also an inaugural Sequoia Professor in the Computer Science Department at Stanford University and co-director and founder of the Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute. Fei-Fei is also the co-founder and chairperson of the national nonprofit AI for All, aimed at increasing inclusion and diversity in AI education. Fei-Fei has published more than 300 scientific articles and is the author of a new book, which you hopefully have all got, or if not, you can get out just outside the door here, of The Worlds I See, Curiosity, Exploration, and the Discovery at the Dawn of AI. So, Fei-Fei, thank you for being here.
Thank you, DJ.
Most of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
This is an incredible book. Let me start with, if we were to visit ourselves back when we were kids and said, 2 immigrants like us are going to be up on stage talking about AI, would that have been possible?
No, we wouldn't even know what AI was.
We wouldn't even know what AI was. And so just a testament of how much you've achieved is that we are talking so much about AI and the impact it's having on the world. But I think we should take a step back and kind of get to where you got your start, because it's a phenomenal journey that you outline in the book itself. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Thank you, everyone. Actually, DJ, I want to share with a very small story about this book. I didn't write the book the way it turned out to be. I was invited to write a book about AI for popular audience, and it was COVID. I spent a year writing a very nerdy book. And it was my friend, philosopher, professor, who read my draft after that year I finished, and who said, "You have to go back and rewrite." I was like horrified to hear that. And his wife is an author, and he said, "That's why my wife never showed me her draft." But then he said, "Look, Fei-Fei, there are people who can talk about technical AI, and I know you can and you should. But for all those immigrants out there, young women out there, people of all walks of life out there, in today's AI, they don't find a voice they can identify with." And he convinced me that my voice represents a very, very important sector of our community. And that's how I ended up writing a double helix science memoir, in the sense of one thread is a coming of age of a scientist, an immigrant. The other thread is the coming of age of AI, and of course our intertwined history. So from that point of view, we were talking a little bit in the backstage, DJ, you and me. This journey I have taken is not unique. We have so many immigrants, so many people of all kinds of origin in this country who have, who have come through, done great things, contributed to this country, to this society. And I hope that even in AI, which is a deeply, deeply technical Silicon Valley, field, we allow room for that voice.
Well said, well said. Well, tell us a little bit about your story, because I think it gives a lot of insight to how you approach the problems of AI.
Right. Well, I still hope you read the book. But, I came here with my parents when I was 15, and of all places, we landed in Parsippany, New Jersey. I'm not so sure anyone here would have heard of that town. It's a very small town in Parsippany in early 1990s, but very serendipitously, about 30 miles away from that little town, there was AT&T Bell Labs, and already computer scientists were making the first generation of neural network. As I just landed in Parsippany, New Jersey, started learning English, went into the public high school, and I was passionate about physics. It really was my biggest passion, and we should talk about a very special person, but before that, in Parsippany High School, before that, I'll just go over the broad stroke. I ended up with a scholarship in Princeton, and then in the middle of that, we had to support our family. My parents still don't speak English, and I ended up in Silicon Valley language. I had my first startup, which is a dry cleaner shop. With literally some angels who helped me, and I ran the dry cleaner shop for 7 years throughout my undergrad as well as my PhD, which was Caltech. So there was some remote work before Zoom, and then I switched from physics to AI because I found that the audacious question of intelligence, what intelligence is, how to make intelligent machines, captivated me towards the end of my undergrad. And I thought that's just my life's calling as a scientist. And that's how I began my journey in PhD time.
But even as, and this comes out a bit in the book, which you all really should read, is you were a non-traditional student even in China. The works you were reading, what you were doing, how you were approaching learning. And what is it that really, where did that love and passion for learning come from? And the reason I'm going to foreshadow this is because you're helping teach computers how to learn.
That's true.
So where did yours start?
Maybe at the end of the day, it's the difference between humans and machines, because where I start is from love, whereas computers don't necessarily start there.
Say more. So what do you mean by love?
If you read my book, there was my parents who supported me, and they loved me in a way that was unconventional. They let a little girl be as curious and as unique as she wanted to be. And my dad, which the book talked about, also is I'm sure you met these kind of people in your life, is just an innately curious person. He loves insects, he loves animals, he loves nature, and his love of those things were infectious, and I kind of become his little sidekick, and just embraced nature when I was a kid, and found my own path. I was a little nerdier than him, I guess, so I found my path in the books a little more than just bugs, and but it's the space they gave me out of their love for me. It was, in that educational system, it's a pretty tight education system, but yet my parents, with all their strength, created a space for me and let me be free in that space. It's not a huge space, but it's a very precious space for a young kid, especially a young girl. In that kind of environment, and that's where it began.
I think you were alluding to one of the people you're talking about is your math teacher. Could you tell us about him?
Yeah, so if this book is partially dedicated to a very special person, the reason he's so special is he's your everyday American public high school teacher. He's not unique in that sense. His name is Bob Sabella, and he was my first math teacher at Persephone High School because he was the head of math department and I had to take placement tests. I didn't speak English, so he had to deal with the troubled ESL kid. And eventually he became my calculus teacher. But in the meantime, he was the most generous, compassionate, and also tough love teacher. He kind of recognized my challenge as a ESL English as second language student. He recognized my loneliness. He recognized I needed help, and he really just took me under his wings. And one thing led to another. We became friends. And we talk about math, but we also talk about literature and sci-fi, which he loves. And he took me to his home, and his wife, also a high school math teacher, just embraced me. And they became my American family. They become my first encounter to the very core value of what this country means to me. Here in Silicon Valley, or many of us also are educated from the other coast, we're like coastal people. We look at America means shiny things, it means startups, it means big skyscrapers in Manhattan. But for me, America means public high school math teacher who had the most fundamental value of generosity, of kindness, and of integrity. And that really, Mr. Bob Sabella and his family became my American family. They stayed with me throughout my course of my study and career. They were one of the angels who helped me to even purchase this dry cleaner shop. And he stayed with me throughout college, throughout graduate school. Unfortunately, he passed away when I actually became a Stanford assistant professor. But I stayed very close to with his family, and I'm so grateful that I have Mr. Bob Sabella in my life. And I think many of us in America have a Mr. Sabella in our life, and I want to use this book to celebrate them. And to
do we have any teachers here? We do. Thank you for being a teacher. Especially all the ones out online too. Thank you for what you do. I think it's well said. It's amazing because you talk also about this teacher, and this is sort of theme through the book, how people put challenges in front of you. And you have this almost audacity to say that's not good enough.
DJ, I think that word is delusion.
I'm going to go with audacity because it is like, and I think this is a good place to talk about ImageNet, because and so I'll ask you to tell us a little bit about it, about how you got to the idea of ImageNet. But this is, the scope and magnitude of where you started with and what you decided to get to. There's audacious and there's Fei audacious. So maybe you could take us through a little bit of that journey.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do like that word, not about me, but that's what physics captured me, is the audacity to dare to ask the most fundamental question of our nature, or beginning of space-time, or smallest particle of the universe, and end of the boundary of the universe. These are crazy, crazy questions that's so audacious. And then eventually it led me to the most audacious question in my mind, which is, what is intelligence, and can we make machines think? So by the time I finished the graduate school, we were smack in the middle of AI winter, right? The public doesn't know much about what this is, but we are starting to, this is, end of my grad school is 2005, 2006. So we entered a very interesting age that machine learning as a mathematical tool is already being introduced to the field of AI. We also are at the beginning of the internet age. And I was an assistant professor working on one of the most mind-boggling question in AI, which is make computers see as humans see. humans don't see, DJ, you sit here, I don't see a black blob or a cylindrical shape. I see a person, I see your expression, I see you were drinking water, you're holding a pen and all that. So we see the world with so much richness and meaning. And we don't know how to make computers do that. And I wanted to create this computer that can see all the objects in the world. But in the meantime, my field, at that time, the standard practice is take a data set of 4 different objects and just work on it. And I was also fortunate enough to have a education, to have my PhD that was interdisciplinary. I did some neuroscience, cognitive science, to be inspired by human intelligence. And we know humans are really capable of seeing meaning, seeing richness in the world. And they also see a lot. As a kid, you grow up just experiencing this world. And I think that was the audacious, delusional idea that I had with my students around 2006, 2007, which is, why don't we map out the whole world of visual richness and give it to the computer and train it with the vast amount of data?
2006, we're talking still, we didn't have really much cloud infrastructure to be able to even get enough hard disks and memory to store that much visual imagery.
Yes, actually that was precisely some of the pushback when I talked about this idea. They're like, we don't even have hard drive to contain, what you're trying to do. But I guess we believed in it. I went to the biggest lexicon taxonomy dictionary, it's called WordNet, and took tens of thousands of visual categories from WordNet.
What's an example of a category to help?
A German Shepherd is a category. A Siamese cat is a category. A microwave is a category. A sedan is a category.
So you have 10,000 of these.
22,000. 22,000. And then we went to the internet. We downloaded billion images.
Lots of cat photos.
Lots of cat. But the internet also has dogs. And so we took billions of images and we decided to curate, which means to clean them and sort them and label them. That was really, truly kind of crazy. In hindsight, I don't know what I was thinking, because I thought I would be hiring undergrads to do this. And the Princeton undergrads were just not that great, I guess. They refused to do it. And around 2007, serendipitously, a student, I was a faculty at Princeton, a student who moved from Silicon Valley, from Stanford to Princeton, said, in Silicon Valley, this is such a great story of Silicon Valley, there's a startup, I heard they're using this platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk. And then that day, when I went to check what Amazon Mechanical Turk was, it turned out to be an online market of workers trying to do digital tasks. You put little digital tasks there, and there are millions of workers, and then you kind of agree. You say, well, I put up for task, and I'll pay $10. If I'm a worker online, if I like that task and I like your pay, I sign up. So it's kind of a marketplace. I checked that out. And I realized a billion images that I don't know who is going to clean and sort for me have found a marketplace. So we set it up, this whole Amazon Mechanical Turk system. It took 3 years, long story short. And eventually we curated ImageNet dataset in 2009, the largest data set in AI at that time. It's also the first real big data. It's the first time big data entered AI and forced the field to think with big data. And then we open sourced it. We created an ImageNet challenge.
But before you get to the challenge, I think it's important to note, what was the perspective of people from academia? When you finally are like, Behold, ImageNet, what happens?
Silence. There wasn't much fanfare.
Why don't you think they got it?
I think it was ahead of its time because, to approach AI with big data was not a concept. Now with ChatGPT and all this, everybody said, of course. But it wasn't like that. There were mathematical models people were paying attention to. These are very elegant models, but they were not thinking from a data-centric point of view. And it has to wait for the right opportunity. I was lucky. I mean, there are many bets in the history of science that were ahead of their time, and maybe they didn't wait long enough or something happened. But I was lucky to be alive, I guess, when this idea started to take fruition. And we put out this challenge in 2012. A professor in Canada, Professor Jeff Hinton, with two very smart students. One is called Alex Kruszewski, the other one is called Ilya Sutskever.
He's been in the news recently.
And they saw ImageNet, and they also saw there is this thing called GPU. They took two GPUs because
GPUs,
graphic processing unit made by NVIDIA. It is better at parallel processing than CPUs, which is the classic Intel chip that most of us were using around 2012. And they programmed that two GPUs with ImageNet data with a classic algorithm that has been around. Remember I said Persephone? I landed in Persephone while they were developing neural network 30 miles away, and in the 90s. And the convergence of these three elements was what people call the beginning of deep learning revolution.
Well, one of the things that sort of strikes me is like at that same time we were on the data side of the community going, oh my gosh, how did she put this data set together? This is going to unlock magic. This is from the LinkedIn side. And so you really were able to empower an unbelievable army of people to try algorithms, to test, to compete. I'm curious, as you were watching these groups work, was it, how much hand-to-hand combat was it? Was there a lot of collaboration going on? What was the nature of the dynamics in the community? And the reason I ask that is we look at today's AI and we see this flat-out race, but I get the sense from your book, it was very different.
It was very different. It was the time where AI was very academic. I feel I grew up in the golden era of AI because it was so academic, it was so friendly. Of course, people have opinions, like they didn't think ImageNet was a thing, and it's their opinion. But we collaborate, we share, we open source, I was visiting MIT all the time, and Berkeley, and, it's just Stanford, Caltech. It was a very different era, but it also is an era that AI didn't work, right? So nobody cared about AI. So
there were no VCs knocking on the door.
There's no VCs. And also, DJ, I want to say, that era of AI, I think women flourished. As a young woman computer scientist, I think I actually benefited from a period of AI where power and money didn't come in yet.
Interesting. Here. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other aspects, because you've taken which ImageNet, and then you saw these breakthroughs. You were able to start putting together, really creative PhD students that typically weren't getting attention anywhere else. Some of the very popular names today, the well-known names of people in the field. But you also decided to take on different areas, including healthcare. And one of the lines that I think you really, which stood out to me, is the theme in particular is dignity. And it strikes me because also woven through this book is the story of your mother and very serious chronic health conditions. So I'd love to tease that out a little bit about how you see dignity, how you see this relationship with people in this space, because there's so much, it's just such a rich narrative that you provided.
Yeah, and also a shout out to you, DJ. You're one of the forefront thinkers and leaders in digital health in our country, right? So this is something we can talk a lot about. Yeah, so you're right. So I have always been a basic science scientist, which is we focus on the fundamental science. But around the time of 2000, I feel like it was right around ImageNet breakthrough. So 2012, 2013. If you live in the Silicon Valley, there is another hot topic, and that's self-driving cars. And I just became Stanford's director of Stanford AI Lab. It's a very historical AI lab, and I was the only woman and the first woman director there. And I was in the middle of, talking to different companies at that time, now interested in self-driving car and all that. And then we're starting to look at that technical problem of high-stake human lives, very complex visual data, and decision-making. And in the meantime, I live a parallel life of going to ER, going to operation room, calling ambulance, home caring, case managing, because I'm the only caretaker for my parents, especially my mom. And then it really dawned on me that the problem of self-driving car and healthcare, especially care delivery, how to take care of the patient, has a lot of commonality. It's high stake because human lives and health. It's complex because the behavior of patients are very complex. The behavior of caretakers are very complex. And also, it needs help because in America, you know this better than me, we have labor shortage for caretakers. We have nurse shortage, and we have even bigger shortage for caretakers for elderlies. So I started to think there is a possibility to use computer vision as a technology to help taking care of patients and elderlies.
Can I just interrupt you for a quick second? Because I think this is what makes you unique, as you said, to help take care of, not replace. And you talk a little bit about this. So could you tell us a little bit about why you also have that ethos?
We absolutely need to replace the verb replace, and to replace it with augment and enhance. Absolutely. I want to tell one story that I did write in the book, and I think DJ, you said you like that story. Long story short, I got a group of clinicians and medical researchers, especially Professor Arnie Milstein, and I start collaborating on this. In the meantime, my mom went into a major surgery, and then I started taking care of her in ICU and then in the patient room. And the doctor, after a major surgery, the doctor ordered her to use spirometer to expand her lung, because that's very important for her as a cardio patient. As soon as the doctor made that order, me, Fei, the daughter, the computer science, I'm very intense. I put her on a schedule. I'm like, okay, the doctor said every hour you have to do this. And I was on a mission to make my mom, not sick, not have pneumonia. I was just like in that workaholic mode. And after a day, my mom just completely broke down and gave up. She rebelled. She's like, I don't care. I'm not going to do spirometer, blah, 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 blah. I was very traumatized. I felt like I was traumatized. And I was like, I'm trying to help, and this is important, blah, blah, blah. I just don't understand. And then several weeks passed. We were back home recovering. I asked my mom, I said, why did you fight with me on that spirometer? Because I was trying to help you. I know you were half medicated, but I was clear-minded. I know how to help you. And then she said, you know what? You are controlling me. I don't have my dignity and self-respect. It was probably one of the most profound conversations, even though it was one sentence in my entire life as a technologist. I realized if I were to make AI before that conversation, I would make a copy of Feifei. I would make AI to work with that schedule, to remind her. It would just be like that. Whereas humans are much more complex. The dignity, how we create a relationship with the help, whether it's through another human or through technology, is much more nuanced, much more profound. No matter what happens, it's the self-respect and dignity that's at the center of our humanity. And technology's role is to enhance and augment and respect that dignity and humanity, not to take it away. And I think that was early. That was like 2016. I don't remember exactly the year. And I think that episode, of course, there's many other episodes, really informed me as a technologist of how to think about the relationship between technology and people. This is why I focus on saying tools are here to help, not to replace.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Let's take an extension of that work, because you not only started a nonprofit, but you also started this new institute at Stanford to really insert humanity and also help the underserved. So maybe let's first start with AI for All and tell us about that and hold some space for what the mission is there.
AI for All is a national profit. My former student, Olga Zusakovsky, and colleague Rick Sommer from Stanford started in 2015 as a summer program to welcome diverse high school students to come to university campuses to spend 2 or 3 weeks to learn about AI. But we focus on inclusion, especially serving community that has been traditionally underserved by technology. We also focus on infusing that human mission into technology education. And that started in 2015. Well, actually, the preparation started in 2014 because I was noticing that the podcast, the airwave of even then was filled with people like, Bill Gates, Elon Musk talking about AI being so dangerous, summoning the demon. Even Stephen Hawking was talking about this, like it's Terminators are coming, it's a crisis. And then I was living in a different crisis that nobody talks about. I was at that time the only female faculty in Stanford AI Lab. We have, less than 15% women graduate students. We have barely any students of, African American background in our graduate program. And I was like, these two crises, one is so sci-fi, the other one is so real. Is there any connection? And I think somewhere in 2014, I made that connection, is that if you are truly worried about AI's future, you should worry about who is making AI today. Thank you. And once I made that connection, I talked to my graduate student at that time, Olga, and my friend Rick, and we're like, we gotta do something. We need to look at the pipeline. We need to work with K-12 students. And that's how we started this AI for All nonprofit organization. We started, the first couple of years was just Stanford, and then Berkeley joined and all that. And Melinda Gates and Jensen Huang family office supported our initial launch. And it's still going. Honestly, I wish it could grow faster.
What would help it grow faster? What would take it? Because we're seeing the transformation of every student wants to use ChatGPT to write their essays, yet this is the actual program for builders. What would it take to make sure that we have this type of technology built by the communities that might be impacted the most?
You want a real answer?
I think they do, for sure.
It's money. It's a nonprofit. We need support. Yeah.
It's a money question.
As a nonprofit, it is a money question. So, but that's a long story. So, but it is there. We're still trying very hard, so we're not giving up.
Good. I'm glad you are continuing it. If people want to find out more about it, how do they find out?
AIforall.org. Yeah.
Right. And maybe talk to us a little bit about why start a new institute at Stanford?
Yeah, so we talked about ImageNet, and then the AI, deep learning revolution happened. And then fast forward to 2017, I was a professor. At that time, I was a professor for like 12 years. And in academia, you can take sabbatical, right? So I was very lucky to be invited by multiple companies, and Google called me and they want me to be chief scientist of Google Cloud. What really captured my attention for this opportunity is cloud serves all businesses, from healthcare to financial services to agriculture to energy to entertainment, media, retail, whatever. So I felt as an academic, it would be a good opportunity for me to go into the real world and learn about the impact of my technology, and also to try to learn how to deliver that in products and services. So I went to Google, and it was like amazing, right? Several things shocked me. First is Stanford is a pretty privileged place, yet going to Google, I realized the scale of this technology making,
Like coffee bars?
Yeah, exactly. And the free food. But the scale was just amazing. The amount of compute Google researchers can use, the kind of software engineering infrastructure.
I mean, you talk about this in the book of how many GPUs you had this basically scrounge dollars for, and then you snap a finger, and how many you can get at
I think in the book I was talking about 800.
800
right?
versus 2.
And this is pre-transformer, pre-GPT technology, right? So anyway, so that was one thing that shocked me. And it really illuminated me. Another thing that illuminated me and also inspired me was AI's reach. We were literally talking to developers like a Japanese cucumber farmer using computer vision to help his business, all the way to Fortune 5 companies, trying to optimize supply chain and customer experience and everything in between. And it dawned on me that this technology that I participated in creating used to be a private curiosity for me. It's just me and my AI because nobody else cared. Now it's the whole world is using it, and there is a responsibility for those of us who created it. And that started to dawn on me. And in the meantime, 2017 and 2018 is the first wave of techlash. I'm sure a lot of you remember this is right at the heel of Cambridge Analytica, the 2016 election. I'm sure you have a strong memory of, DJ. and the first time we have self-driving car injuries and death, the first time we see bias system, especially facial recognition bias, the first time we got into
criminal justice bail calculators, assessors being fundamentally racist.
Exactly. And we also see the first intense debate of AI and weaponization. And all this taught me one thing, that AI is messy. AI as a technology social impact is messy. AI as a math is not messy. Math is 1 + 1 = 2. But as a technology, it's messy. And we are the people who are going to usher the human race into this new era. What is our responsibility? And that's where I really decided, as much as I love Google, I love the experience, I appreciate it, I have a responsibility to return to the public sector to create a new framework of creating AI and governing AI, and that is the Human-Centered AI Framework. And with the support of Stanford leadership, I returned to Stanford after my sabbatical and created the first Human-Centered AI Institute in the world, I guess.
Yes. Well, we've had a number of really good questions. Our great staff here at the Commonwealth Club are collecting questions. Keep bringing them in. A number of the questions, let's shift gears into today and where we're going. And maybe the place to start is we're seeing, you can't turn on the radio or open a web browser without hearing some news about AI, the most recent one being everything that's happened at OpenAI most recently. And there's a question of doomers versus techno-optimists. Where do you stand in the spectrum, and how should we be thinking about it?
Yeah, I actually recommend a public discussion I had with Jeff Hinton a month ago in Toronto. It's on YouTube. AI is too nuanced and too complex to go binary. And as all technologies, human civilization is a history of tool making. And we've always created more and more powerful tools, and we've always have had a complex relationship with tools. And AI is going to kick this into another gear. So it is intellectually a fair question to talk about, is AI conscious? Is it sentient? As a scholar who lives on a university campus, no question is wrong. We should ask this. But that is juxtapositioned with much more real social risks that I call them catastrophic social risks, such as disinformation and democracy, job change, weaponization, bias, copyright, intellectual property, privacy infringement. These are such real issues that I would worry if we shift all of our attention and fill our airwaves with the most extreme doomers conversation. We are actually missing the critical conversation and action towards these really important, pressing, urgent social risks. In the meantime, as a scientist who participated in creating AI, I see its opportunity in healthcare, in medicine, in scientific discovery, in climate solutions, in many things. So I also see amazing opportunity, education. But I don't think we can only say it is only good. There's nothing bad. So you can hear, I'm just not going to give you black and white extreme answers, because I think the real work and the real discussion and real thinking is the messy middle.
How do, one of the questions, these are fantastic questions. I think you have enough for your next book here. So kudos to the audience.
GPT will write my next book.
One of the questions that's in here is, how do people get up to speed, stay on top of things, be engaged, either because they may not be technical, some may be technical. What's your advice for people on how they can best learn about these complex subjects and then have a voice?
Yeah, first of all, I think we start with you have to believe you have a voice, especially you're in a democratic society. And as a citizen, as a member of a community, and as expert in your own field, you have a voice. And this is a tool. Our relationship with this tool is that we need to learn how to use it, or we need to learn what this is. In terms of how to get to know the today's technical AI, there are actually a lot of resources. If you are technically you have a technical background, then there's a lot of papers to read. There's a lot of, even on the internet, whether it's YouTube or other social media, you've got a lot of people who are communicating this and digesting the latest papers. It's a little overwhelming, but if you do have a tech background, there are resources. If you don't have a tech background, there are actually also good resources. For example, if you subscribe to Stanford HAI's newsletter, we put a lot lot of briefings.
How do they find it?
hai.stanford.edu. You can scroll down. There is subscribe. Just go subscribe, because we have a lot of public seminars. We have a lot of briefings for policy makers, for industry decision makers, and all that. And there are also courses that you can take from Coursera and all that. So the materials are out there. It is, I'm not going to lie, it's a bit overwhelming, but if you have the will to learn, depending on where your expertise, your angle is, it's actually a very, there is a lot of access point, especially where we are. I worry about global access, for example, our global south, if our students want to learn there. I think we have a bigger issue, but in this community, there's a lot of materials.
Well, let's take this to the national and international stage. What are you telling the president?
So I met him, right? And
it's very notable. You were one of the featured people to educate President Biden on this.
So I told President Biden that this technology is so important that we should adapt a moonshot mentality in resourcing public sector AI. And thank you. Let me explain. America's leadership in our technology, and also in actually a more well-rounded leadership in the world, has always stemmed from a it's not perfect, fairly healthy ecosystem of innovation, entrepreneurship, industry, and with the government playing, when it's done right, playing a positive role in resourcing this. But right now, we are so imbalanced. Not a single university in America can train a ChatGPT model. I used to wonder if all universities' GPU combined can train a ChatGPT model. Recently, I heard there are some universities on the East Coast who are starting to buy more GPUs, so I'm very envious of them. But anyway,
it's kind of, there's an irony that you're only so many miles from the headquarters of the company
don't
that
even
produces
get me started. And speaking of alumni, so
you give your lectures in there,
yes.
in the hall named after them.
Yeah, but so why do we need public sector? There are two very important reasons. First of all, public sector creates public goods. Scientific discovery is public good. We can use AI to cure from cancer to rare diseases, to discover new materials, to accelerate fusion research, to map out the whole world's biodiversity, to create climate solutions. These are all public goods, and they happen in public sector. If we're depriving public sector from this tool, this critical tool, we're depriving our humanity, our species, from knowing this knowledge and having this innovation. So that's one reason. The second reason is public sector serves as a trusted source to explain and to evaluate and to assess what this technology is, right? So Stanford's HAI, my institute, was the first one and the only one who is evaluating the large language models created by multiple companies. We just put out a work of evaluating the large language model against European Union's AI Act suggested transparency measure. But the public tends to trust what the public sector does. Now, if we don't resource public sector well, we're not going to be able to know what this technology is. We're not going to be able to look under the hood and also to co-develop this important technology. So for these two reasons, it is so important we resource public sector, and we especially encourage public sector to work on safe AI, ethical AI, and AI for many disciplines.
How should we think about it internationally? because, there is this abject conflict that is taking place economically with China. There's real security questions with countries like Russia and Iran using AI. And you were also at Google while the whole debate around Project Maven took place. And I'm curious, through your eyes, how do you see about the international complexity?
Yeah, so the truth is, look, DJ, this is why I say it's messy, right? Technology is messy, tools are messy, human world is messy. And I'm not going to pretend I know the answer of all of this. One of the great things about being a wonderful university like Stanford is that we have experts. In fact, HAI as a technology institute, we deeply, deeply collaborate. We collaborate with the Hoover Institute. We collaborate with the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. And we collaborate with CEPR, which is our Economic Policy Institute, because we've got policy thinkers, political scientists, economists to help us to grapple this together. And we also, I believe in partnership. First of all, as a academic institute, we believe in partnership with many communities, including the government and governments of the world. We have been especially close with the EU and Australian and those governments that have a shared value system. And we think that's very, very important. And we also play a role. I feel one of my role I can play in my leadership position is to create the bridge to help our deep policy experts, political scientists, to be educated about the technology, and then they can apply their expertise to go advise the governments or do.
Do you think they get it? Because recently you ran, actually, well, I can say it because it's publicly reported, you ran a boot camp for Congress. We've seen some of the commentary out of Congress.
Oh, you
talk to them. What's it like?
The government better than me, DJ. I actually think they have changed for the better, because our institute was established in 2019, and the first trip I took was Washington, D.C., and people don't understand what I was talking about. Like, they can barely spell AI, and not we actually work with Trump administration, and there were some experts in this. Yeah, so you might even know some of them. But by and large, even bipartisan, they didn't pay attention. Well, this past year, the amount of attention from the DC world is phenomenal. Now, I do wish they find more experts. They do talk to people of public sector as well. Of
one category.
Yeah, and also...
Right, I mean, I say this with all seriousness because we just saw this, some of you may have seen this, also this weekend there was a big news story about the people, the New York Times, who said these are the fundamental people who have driven AI, and if I just may call it, it was all white men, and ignored most of the historical people that you talk about also in your book who mentored you, helped you, and you were part of their journey. They ignored you as well. And so this gets to a question also of, we almost have a rewritten ChatGPT hallucinated version of AI history going on right now?
Yes, I think we do need to call this out. I don't know how many of you saw, I know you did, that New York Times article, and it was 100% men. And some of them, while they might be business leaders or investors, were not central to the creation of AI at all. So, I don't know, should we send 3 letters to New York Times? It is. I do think we need to call them out. This is unacceptable. There are so many women and also even men they didn't mention who have made fundamental contribution, and they just completely ignored it. And it's just unacceptable.
I agree. One of the questions that we've got in here is from a number of students who are here. And one of the things that they ask is, maybe to start with this is, tying this back to your book, you really pay, as we talked about earlier, unbelievable tributes to your mentors and your students. So maybe in putting this in a couple questions together, what advice do you have for people who are in need of mentorship or could be mentors, and to make sure that they're lifting everyone up? How can high school students get hands-on experience? What opportunities are for them? And also another one was, what do you advise people who are graduating from high school, going into college, should they be thinking about?
Be nice to your teachers. No, just kidding. If there's one theme I was writing this book with, it's the theme of North Stars. It's, of course, I found my North Star in AI, and I don't think everybody needs to find their North Star in AI, but I think the true human story of my journey and my mentor's journey, my student's journey is you be fearless, be courageous, and be passionate, and be curious, and find the North Star. And they might change in different stages of life, but no matter what stage you are in, whether you're mentoring someone or being mentored or thinking about your major in college, I really encourage you to find that North Star that makes you feel curious and passionate and filled with a sense of mission. And I think that is just a wonderful thing to have. It's a beautiful feeling, and it makes you most creative. And frankly, you don't feel tired if you are working on something you're excited about.
Mm-hmm. What about for people who are in positions here who could be mentors? What have you seen that works really well for people who are in positions of power or privilege?
So that's my role for many years now as a mentor, and as I work with students, the thing that I keep learning over and over again is, how do we help them to find their North Star? It's not about us, it's about the people we mentor, and the best way to mentor is to learn who the students are, who the young people are, what they want, and maybe sometimes it just takes a mentor to help them to see their North Star. Sometimes it's young people are not necessarily seeing what their calling is, and if a mentor can play that role, at least for me, that's just so satisfactory and rewarding.
Great. Several people asked about the role of quantum computers and the impact it may have on AI.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't think I know enough, and I don't think we know enough about where quantum computing is going yet. It's still very, very early. If quantum computing, in the way that we hope it is, succeeds, it'll unlock the kind of computational power that today's computers don't have. And since AI is a deeply, deeply computational field, it's driven by big data, big compute, there might be a shift in how AI is done. But right now, just at least in my limited knowledge, it's not material yet,
Okay. You barely sleep as it is. What keeps you up at night?
That New York Times article.
Are you worried about AGI?
That's a great question. I would not say I'm not worried. I think I'm already worried about AI. As I said, I'm already worried about the catastrophic social risks. I'm worried about 2024. I'm worried about the creator economy that is being disrupted by AI right now. I'm worried about the shifting of economy. There's one thing I want to double click on that. I do believe AI is a great tool to increase the total productivity. I see that opportunity so clearly. But increase of productivity doesn't mean there is a fair distribution of prosperity. And we have seen that in globalization, and we might be seeing this in AI. So it's not enough to just talk about productivity increase. We have to also talk about prosperity distribution, and that's a huge topic in the age of AI we should be thinking about from policy point of view, as well as from just social science point of view. So all these do keep me up at night, so that's why I'm excited to work in human-centered AI. I'm not yet staying up at night thinking about the doomsday scenario.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you were talking earlier about, when Bill Gates and others were talking about the doomsday scenario, and we were tasked by President Obama to come up with a national strategy for AI.
That's how we met.
That's how we first met. And one of the things that I think we tried to put together, and we got, I think, a lot right, but also a fair amount of wrong, of which jobs are going to be replaced or displaced is probably a more accurate phrasing. So as you look forward over the next 5 years, where does the biggest impact happen?
Yeah, well, I think the impact, we have to define it. If it's really on jobs, I think we're seeing knowledge workers, right? Even software engineering being impacted. And then
because before we thought it was going to be truck drivers and short cooks and other very manual labor, but we messed up on dexterity. It's hard to replace.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually more than dexterity. We also don't have a good world model. We have a good language model, and this is getting to the technical topics, right? So given we have a breakthrough in language models, I think, knowledge work, especially the way, again, talking about productivity, how do we make software engineering more productive? How do we service customers better? How do we search better, recommend things better? Of course, everything I said has both good and bad, right? But I think there is going to be a lot of impact. The large language model technology is not a hype. It really can have deep, profound industry impact.
Do you let your kids use it?
I do, actually.
How so?
Okay, this is a question I get a lot, and I actually want to talk about it. As educators do ask me, especially K-12, so my kids are in that age, is that should kids use this? And my answer is yes, but there is a but, right? Like, first of all, look, this is a tool. We created it. It's not, the genie is not going to go back to the bottle. And this is a generation that will be embracing a world with this tool already created. But I think what we should do is let them embrace it by learning to use it responsibly. By, learning to use it so that they can enhance and augment their own agency, their own creativity, their own productivity, not to use it as a crutch that let them lose their agency. And how to dial that knob is the task of an educator, and then also in collaboration with all of us. But I do think this is a great tool for even K-12 learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're almost coming up on time, which is always hard to believe how fast it flies here. One last question. What's the best piece of professional advice that you've received? Who was it from? And how do you translate that for today's people going forward?
I guess I'm going to go back to my high school math teacher, Bob Sabella. I don't think he actually said, here is a piece of advice I'm giving you. He just embodied it, which is paying forward. He had nothing to expect of me. I was this kid who didn't know what's going on. And his kindness, his compassion, his generosity, and also his integrity. He was a tough teacher, and helped me to see a future, helped me to pave a path. And that, is a way of paying forward. And over and over again, I think about what I have had the privilege to benefit from all the support of not only him, but my mentors and my supporters. And I want to pay forward. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think it's just a great thing to do for everybody.
I think that's a great note to end on, which is love and the passion that you bring to this. Fei-Fei, I want to personally thank you for being such a North Star to the community around AI and all the energy and effort you do to keep us headed towards that North Star. So thank you, Dr. Fei-Fei Li. Please join me in thanking her. Fei-Fei is the author of Worlds I Can See, Curiosity, Exploration, and Discovery at the Dawn of AI. I encourage you to pick up a copy of Dr. Li's book here outside or at your local bookstore. And if you'd like to support the club's efforts in making a virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit our website at www.commonwealthclub.org. I'm DJ Patil. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Fei-Fei.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, everyone.